There are moments in life that change everything, when a single touch, a fleeting glance, or a quiet conversation can unravel the parts of ourselves we've kept hidden for years. This is one of those moments. It started as a simple house blessing, but when Pastor Elijah walked through that door, nothing would ever be the same. The warmth in his eyes, the way his hand lingered, it all stirred something inside me I didn't know was there. But the real question is, what happens when we let those feelings in? Let's find out. It was a Sunday evening, just like any other. Or at least that's what I tried to tell myself. My mother had invited Pastor Elijah over to bless our house. A simple gesture she believed would bring some peace, some holiness to our home. To her, it was all part of keeping us grounded, especially after my father passed. For her, faith had become the thread that held us together, and now, this new pastor was going to be the anchor we needed. But little did I know, this evening was about to unearth things I'd buried so deep, I didn't even know they were there. When I first saw him walk through the door, I wasn't expecting much. I had this image in my head of what a young new pastor would look like. Someone in their 40s, maybe with a stern face and a voice that carried authority. Instead, Pastor Elijah walked in and immediately everything changed. He wasn't what I imagined. He was warm, engaging, and surprisingly young. Barely 35, with smooth brown skin, sharp cheekbones, and a smile that seemed to make everyone feel like they were the most important person in the room. He wasn't just another pastor. He was someone who seemed to command a presence. "Thank you for having me," he said with a sincerity that felt real, not just polite. His handshake, when he greeted my mother, was firm but gentle. He made eye contact like he was truly seeing her, not just going through the motions. She beamed, praising him immediately, but when he turned to me, everything shifted. I had to force myself to make eye contact. It wasn't just his smile or his words, it was something in the way he looked at me, as if he could see through the surface, past the polite smile I wore, past all the walls I'd carefully built. "And you must be Micah," he said, his voice soft but clear, as if he'd known me all along. "Yeah, I'm Micah," I mumbled, feeling a heat rise in my cheeks. His gaze lingered a little too long, almost as if he could see the part of me I had spent years trying to keep hidden. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. There was something about him, something about his presence that was different. Something that made me feel like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, unsure whether to jump or pull back. Dinner went on as expected. Nothing unusual. Nothing that should have caught my attention. My mother and grandmother were talking, laughing, enjoying the warmth of the evening, but my mind was elsewhere. Every time I stole a glance at Pastor Elijah, I felt this stirring inside of me, this pull I couldn't explain. He was kind, engaging, thoughtful, and yet there was something in his presence that felt dangerous, unexpected. And then came the moment that would change everything. After dinner, we moved to the living room for the house blessing. My mother, of course, was excited. She was practically glowing. "Micah, go stand with Pastor Elijah. He'll lead us in prayer," she said. And before I could even process what was happening, I found myself standing next to him, close enough to feel the heat from his body. He placed his hand on my shoulder as he began to pray. His touch was warm, grounding, and yet it sent a shiver down my spine. I tried to focus on the words, but all I could think about was the feeling of his hand resting on me. It wasn't just a casual touch. It felt intentional, like it carried meaning, even if neither of us spoke it aloud. His thumb brushed ever so slightly, almost like a caress, and for a brief second, I thought I imagined it. But when I opened my eyes, I saw that his gaze was still fixed on me, the quiet intensity in his eyes making my heart race. I had to look away. I couldn't focus. The room felt smaller, and the air was thick with unspoken tension. After the prayer ended, Elijah didn't break away immediately. He lingered for just a moment longer, and that moment stretched into something that felt bigger than either of us. And then came the most unexpected thing of all. He asked to speak with me privately. "Micah, may I speak with you for a moment?" His voice was calm, steady, but I could hear the weight behind it. My heart leaped into my throat. I didn't know why, but I knew something was about to happen that I wasn't ready for. "Sure," I said, my voice barely a whisper. We walked together to the den, the silence between us stretching like an invisible rope, both of us tentative, unsure of what was to come. We sat across from each other, the only sound in the room the quiet hum of the ceiling fan. "You seem thoughtful," he said, studying me, his eyes searching, like he was trying to read something in me that I didn't even know was there. I shifted in my seat, uncomfortable under his gaze. "I'm just quiet," I said, hoping to brush it off, but his next words hit me like a wave. "You don't have to tell me anything, Micah, but I want you to know I've seen that look before. I've seen young men carry things they're afraid to name," he said softly. "If you ever want to talk, I'm here." Those words, simple yet profound, hung in the air like a confession I didn't know how to respond to. I should have said something, should have closed myself off as I always did, but in that moment, I didn't. I just sat there, feeling the weight of his words settle deep inside me. I had no idea what was happening, but somehow I knew my life was about to change. In the silence that followed, I realized this wasn't just a pastor offering a blessing. This was a man who saw me, really saw me, and that frightened me more than anything. Something shifted that night in the quiet after Pastor Elijah left. When he'd placed his hand on my shoulder, I didn't just feel a touch. I felt like something was awakening inside me, something I hadn't even known was there, something I had spent so long pushing down. I couldn't explain it. I wasn't ready for it, but I felt it. It was as if his touch opened a door I had locked up years ago and tried to forget about. And now, all of a sudden, I couldn't ignore it anymore. The next few days after Elijah's visit felt like walking through fog. Everything was familiar, yet my perception had changed. My mother, of course, couldn't stop singing Elijah's praises. "Such a good man," she'd say. "He truly has a heart for people, Micah." "I'm so glad we found him." And I would just nod, keeping my distance, keeping my thoughts to myself. But those thoughts, they were anything but distant. They kept coming back to me, again and again. I couldn't stop thinking about that look he had given me, the weight behind it, and most of all, that unspoken understanding between us. It was like he saw me, not just the good son I tried so hard to be, but the real me. The one that wasn't perfect, the one that carried secrets and contradictions that I couldn't even admit to myself, let alone anyone else. It was in the way he didn't push me. He didn't ask me to spill my soul or share anything I wasn't ready for. Instead, it was his silence, his patience, that spoke louder than any words could. Pastor Elijah was offering me something I hadn't realized I needed: space. Space to breathe, space to be, and space to understand that it was okay not to have it all figured out. What made it more confusing was the way he looked at me, even when he wasn't saying anything. His eyes, steady and unflinching, seemed to say, "I see you. I see the part of you you don't want anyone to see, but I'm not going to judge. I'm not going to make you feel like you're wrong." I felt understood in a way I hadn't in years. A quiet kind of empathy that didn't demand, didn't ask for anything in return. And then came that evening, just days after our last conversation. Elijah came over again, this time for a more casual visit. My mother couldn't stop talking about how wonderful he was, how much he'd helped her, how much he'd done for the church. But as much as I tried to focus on her words, I found myself thinking about Elijah, about the way his presence felt like both a relief and a challenge. That night, when Elijah sat down beside me, I couldn't help but notice how natural it felt. It wasn't awkward, it wasn't forced. The connection, whatever it was, seemed to flow effortlessly, and yet it was undeniable. As we sipped our tea, my heart raced. I couldn't tell if it was the nervous excitement of being close to him, or if it was the weight of the unspoken tension that lingered in the air between us. Either way, I couldn't ignore it. And then, of course, there was the moment when he leaned in. "Micah, do you trust me?" The words fell softly, but the impact hit like a wave. I froze for a second, feeling the weight of his question. Did I trust him? Could I trust him? Could I even trust myself? I nodded, though I wasn't sure I knew the answer myself. His gaze softened. There was nothing pushing, nothing rushing, just a steady, calming presence that made me want to let go of all the walls I'd carefully built around myself. "You don't have to say anything, Micah," he said, "but I want you to know that if you ever need to talk, I'm here. You don't have to carry this alone." His voice was steady, gentle, but there was something in it, something that made me feel seen, truly seen, in a way that was almost too much to handle. For a moment, all I could do was sit there, unsure of what to say. My heart was pounding, and my mind was racing with all the things I had buried deep within myself. Elijah didn't say anything else. He didn't push. He just waited, and in that silence, something inside me cracked open. It was like a door had opened, but I wasn't sure if I was ready to walk through it. His words lingered in the room, not demanding a response, but offering a kind of invitation. An invitation to trust, to open up, and maybe, just maybe, to let go of the secrets I had been carrying for so long. But still, I wasn't ready. I wasn't sure if I ever would be. And so, we stayed in that quiet, unspoken space, each of us holding on to something we weren't ready to acknowledge. But in that moment, I realized something. This wasn't just a casual encounter. This wasn't just a simple conversation. Pastor Elijah had shown me something I hadn't expected. He had given me a glimpse of understanding, a glimpse of the possibility that maybe, just maybe, it was okay to let go of the things I had been hiding from for so long. And the most surprising part? He didn't make me feel ashamed for it. Instead, he offered me the space to simply be, without judgment, without expectation. As the night drew to a close, the unspoken connection between us didn't go away. It lingered, quietly, like a soft whisper in the background. And I knew, deep down, that this was just the beginning of something that would change everything. I couldn't deny it any longer. There was something about him, something that made me feel both seen and safe, yet scared all at once. And that feeling? That was the start of something I wasn't sure I was ready for. But I knew it would change everything. It wasn't the first time Elijah had been to our house, but this time something felt different. Maybe it was the way his smile lingered just a second too long when he entered, or the way his eyes seemed to search mine a little more deeply than before. There was an intensity now, an unsaid tension that hung in the air. It wasn't loud, it wasn't obvious, but it was undeniable. I remember the first time he came. It was all politeness and warmth. A house blessing, some tea, a casual exchange. But now there was something more, something electric, a current flowing just beneath the surface that neither of us dared to acknowledge out loud. Every moment, every glance, felt charged. He was no longer just the pastor in my house, offering prayers and guidance. He was something else, and so was I. Elijah's presence was impossible to ignore. It was like he wasn't just physically there, but his energy, his gaze, his warmth, had a way of settling around me, drawing me in. And for the first time, I didn't feel uncomfortable by it. I didn't recoil, I didn't push it away. Instead, I leaned into it, even if I wasn't ready to understand what it meant. That evening, my mother was buzzing around, telling Elijah how much she appreciated his visits. Her praise flowed freely, but I could feel my mind drifting to the space between Elijah and me. Each time he looked at me, I felt it. The subtle shift in the air. I wasn't sure what it was yet, but it was there, like the gentle rising of a storm. I had always been the quiet one, keeping my thoughts to myself, hiding the parts of me I couldn't quite explain. But when Elijah spoke to me, there was a stillness in his voice, a calm that made me want to listen. Dinner came and went, the usual chatter filling the room. My grandmother dozing off after soup, my mom talking about church events. And all the while, I could feel Elijah's presence near me, always just a little too close, but never crossing a line. It was like we both knew something was happening, something that neither of us could quite articulate. Then, when everyone else had scattered, and the tea had cooled in our cups, Elijah turned to me. "I wanted to apologize," he said quietly. His voice was soft but full of intention. "If I made you uncomfortable last time." I froze, unsure how to respond. Did he think I felt uncomfortable? How could I tell him it wasn't discomfort I felt, but something else. Something much harder to define, something that simmered beneath my skin. I shook my head, perhaps a little too quickly. "You didn't," I said, though I was unsure of what I was really feeling. He studied me for a moment. I didn't know how to read his expression. It was serious, but not heavy. Calm, but searching. "Are you sure?" he asked. His voice was low, almost as if it was a question that had been lingering in the space between us for longer than either of us had realized. His eyes didn't leave mine, and the intensity of his gaze made my heart race. There it was again, the unspoken tension, the weight of what was happening between us. I nodded, my breath catching in my chest. "Yeah, I'm sure," I said, even though I wasn't entirely sure of anything anymore. He leaned forward just slightly, closing the distance between us. The space around us felt smaller, like there was only the two of us left in the room, as if everything else had faded away. "Micah," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Do you trust me?" That question. It hit me like a wave. Trust? Could I trust him? Could I trust myself? I felt like I was on the edge of something, like if I moved, it would all come tumbling down. But if I didn't move, if I stayed frozen, pretending nothing was happening, nothing would change. I swallowed hard, not knowing if I was ready to say the words, but somehow I did. "Yeah," I whispered back, the simple word holding so much more weight than I ever expected. For a moment, we just sat there. The room felt too quiet, too still, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was just real. In that silence, something shifted. And I knew, though I wasn't ready for it, that we were both standing on the precipice of something that would change everything. The tension between us wasn't just about desire, or curiosity, or even fear. It was about the truth that neither of us could quite face yet. The truth about what was happening, about what we were feeling. I could feel it, the unspoken understanding between us. There was no rush to act on it, no urgency to do something with it. But the way he looked at me, so openly, so honestly, made me wonder if he felt the same way I did. Was I just imagining it, or was there something deeper between us? Something that went beyond what either of us had expected or wanted. The rest of the evening passed like a dream, with quiet conversations and soft smiles. But underneath it all, the tension was building, rising like the storm I could feel coming. And as Elijah left that night, his goodbye was almost a relief. But I knew deep down that it wasn't over. Not yet. The storm wasn't coming yet, but it was on the horizon. And when it hit, it would change everything. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of that change. Not anymore. There are moments in life when everything shifts, when time seems to stretch and break into something entirely new, something you've never imagined but always secretly hoped for. That night, it felt like the world around us had stopped moving, as if the universe itself had decided to hold its breath. The air in the room felt different, charged with something unsaid, something we were both too afraid to name. Elijah had been different that evening. There was a quiet intensity in the way he carried himself, a soft tension that seemed to grow with every passing second. I had felt it the moment he stepped through the door, and now, as we sat together, something inside me was unraveling. It was like I was finally seeing him, truly seeing him, for the first time. Not just the man who stood in front of a pulpit on Sundays, but the person who carried his own battles, his own struggles. The man whose touch, whose words, were stirring something deep inside me. I tried to ignore it, to keep my mind busy with the mundane things, the clink of teacups, the soft hum of the ceiling fan. But the silence between us grew heavier, more palpable with every second. And as much as I wanted to pretend nothing was happening, I couldn't escape it anymore. Every glance, every lingering moment was a spark, and I was watching it catch fire. We were sitting on the porch, the cool night air wrapping around us. The world outside felt distant, almost unreal. All I could focus on was him. The way his voice softened when he spoke to me, how it seemed to draw me closer. The way he didn't just see me, but saw right through me, straight into the parts of me I had buried for years. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid. Not of him, not of what this was. "You've always been so quiet," he said, his voice low, almost like a confession itself. His words lingered in the air between us, mixing with the night's stillness. "But there's more to you than that, Micah. I see it." I looked at him, trying to gauge if he truly understood, if he could see the layers of me I had hidden away for so long. My heart was pounding, and I felt the weight of his gaze on me, steady and searching. It was like the walls I had built around myself were crumbling, piece by piece, with every word he spoke. I wanted to say something, to tell him how his presence made me feel, how much his touch had unsettled me, but I couldn't find the words. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. My hands felt clammy, my chest tight. It wasn't just the kiss that had changed things. It was everything that had led up to that moment. The tension between us had been building, silently growing, and now it was spilling over. Without thinking, without any more hesitation, I reached out. I placed my hand on his arm, just for a moment. His eyes softened, and he looked at me as though he had been waiting for me to make this move. Then it happened. A moment that neither of us could have anticipated, but both had somehow been moving toward. He leaned in slowly, cautiously, as though asking permission with every inch closer. His breath was warm against my skin, and I could feel the weight of it, the electricity between us, crackling in the air. And then, just as gently as the storm I felt brewing inside me, his lips brushed against mine. It wasn't a rush. It wasn't desperate. It was slow, deliberate, an exploration of something unspoken, but undeniable. The world outside seemed to disappear as everything else faded into the background. There was just him, just me, and the shared silence of two people who had been trying to ignore what was happening between them. I didn't pull away. I didn't question it. I leaned into him, letting the kiss deepen, letting myself be consumed by it. Every touch, every movement felt like it was both a discovery and a homecoming. It was everything I had been holding inside, everything I had been afraid to acknowledge, wrapped into one single, tender moment. His hands found their way to my back, pulling me closer, grounding me as the kiss grew more intense. There was nothing about this that felt wrong. Nothing that made me want to stop. Instead, I let myself fall into it, fall into him, as if I had been waiting my whole life for this connection. The kiss wasn't just about desire. It wasn't just about the longing we both carried. It was about something deeper, something neither of us could articulate, but both of us understood. It was about letting go of the fears, the doubts, the shame that had bound us for so long. And in that moment, there was no room for any of that anymore. There was only the truth of us, standing in the light of something we had both been too afraid to confront. When we finally pulled away, we didn't say anything. There was no need for words. The silence between us was full of everything that had been left unsaid, full of everything we had just shared. But more than that, it was full of possibility, a new beginning, a change that had come so quietly but was now impossible to ignore. His eyes were on mine, and I could see something flicker there, vulnerability, desire. But also, something else, something deeper, something real. He didn't need to say it out loud. I could feel it in the way he touched me, in the way he looked at me. He wanted this. He wanted us. And for the first time in my life, I didn't have to hide anymore. I didn't have to pretend. The kiss wasn't just a kiss. It was the moment everything changed. And as I sat there, heart still racing, I realized something. This wasn't the end of anything. It was only the beginning. The night had felt like the beginning of something. But as the days went on, the weight of it all started to sink in. The kiss, the connection we shared. Those moments felt like they belonged to a different world, a world I didn't know how to navigate. I had wanted to believe that things between us could just flow, that everything we felt would be accepted without question, without consequence. But life doesn't always let us live in that bubble of illusion. In the days that followed, there was a heavy silence that hung in the air. Not just in the space between us, but within me. My mind was a storm of conflicting thoughts. Guilt, fear, confusion. I had always done everything right, gone to church, followed the rules, been the obedient son. And now, I was left with the pieces of a moment that felt too powerful to ignore, yet too dangerous to acknowledge. I spent those days replaying that kiss in my head. Every touch, every shift, felt like it had broken something deep inside me. Something I had kept hidden. Something I had convinced myself I didn't need to face. And the worst part? I couldn't stop thinking about it. The way his lips had felt on mine. The way his body had moved against mine. I knew it wasn't just a fleeting moment. There was something real there, something we both felt. But it wasn't something I could just accept, not without the baggage I carried. The shame, the fear that it was wrong, that I was wrong. I avoided him. I couldn't face him. Not yet. The silence between us grew, thick and suffocating. He didn't reach out, not in any way that would make me confront what we had done. And that, in itself, was a kind of silence. The kind that says everything without saying a word. It was as if he was giving me space to come to terms with everything, but I wasn't sure I wanted to come to terms with it. What if the guilt never went away? What if I had ruined everything? The distance between us became more than just physical. I could feel it in the air, in the way we moved around each other. There was a strange tension that clung to every glance, every word spoken. He wasn't the same with me anymore. Not in the way he used to be, and I wasn't the same either. It was like we were both holding back, waiting for the other to make the first move, to break the silence and acknowledge what had happened. But every time I looked at him, I saw the man who had touched me, who had kissed me, and I couldn't escape that image. The guilt came in waves. Some days I would wake up feeling fine, thinking I had put everything behind me. But then, the memories would resurface. His voice. His touch. And I would remember the way he looked at me, the tenderness in his eyes. It was hard to ignore how much it had meant, how much I wanted it to mean something more. But I couldn't let it. I couldn't allow myself to want it. It wasn't just about the church, or my mother's expectations. It was about everything I had been taught to believe about myself, that I had to fit into a box, that love had to look a certain way. The guilt was a constant companion, whispering that I had done something wrong. I had crossed a line, and in the quiet of my room, I would cry, silently wishing things could be different, wishing I didn't feel so trapped in my own skin. And yet, even through all of this, there was something deeper stirring within me. A part of me that wanted to break free, to embrace what I was feeling. But I wasn't sure if I was strong enough to do it, not without losing something important, something I wasn't willing to risk. The guilt told me that I was weak, that I should be ashamed. But I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe the shame wasn't mine to carry. Maybe it was something I had been taught to hold on to, something that had never really been mine to begin with. Days passed. The silence stretched on. The distance between us only grew. But inside, I felt like I was being pulled in two directions. One part of me wanting to stay where it was safe, in the silence, in the distance. The other part of me, the part I tried to bury, reaching out for something I couldn't quite name. I knew what I felt. I knew what I wanted. But what would it cost me? What would it cost Elijah? What would it cost us? I could hear the quiet in the house when I came home, the absence of something that used to be there, a presence that had once felt familiar. It wasn't just him I was avoiding. I was avoiding myself. The truth of who I was, what I felt, and what I needed. The silence was the only thing I could control. But even silence has a way of breaking. Even the loudest moments of denial will eventually give way to the truth we've been hiding from. The truth that refuses to stay buried. The truth that lives in the quiet spaces, in the shadows of the unspoken. And eventually, I knew we would have to face it. I didn't know when or how, but I knew the silence wouldn't last forever. I think sometimes the hardest thing we ever face is the truth we hide from ourselves. It's the moment when everything we've built, the walls, the boundaries, the excuses, come crumbling down, and we're left with nothing but raw, unfiltered reality. That night, with Elijah, I had a feeling we were standing on the edge of something like that. The air between us was charged, thick with unspoken words, and I knew that it was only a matter of time before the silence would break. But I wasn't ready for it. Not really. We had avoided talking about it, avoiding the truth like it was something dangerous. But there was no escaping it anymore. The weight of everything, the kiss, the connection, the fear of what it meant for both of us, was too much to bear. And so, as we stood in that quiet, dimly lit space, I could feel the shift in the air. I could sense that this was the moment where everything would be revealed. No more hiding. Elijah stood there in front of me, a slight hesitation in his posture, the same calm, steady presence I had always admired. But tonight, there was something different about him. The calmness in his eyes, the way he held himself. It was as if he was about to say something he had been carrying for far too long. "Micah," he began, his voice low, almost a whisper. "I think we need to talk." I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest, unsure of where this conversation would take us. My hands were shaking slightly, and for the first time I felt vulnerable, exposed. The walls I had built around myself for so long, protecting me from the parts of me I didn't want to face, started to feel like they were slipping away. Elijah took a deep breath, his gaze never leaving mine. He spoke slowly, carefully, as if every word was weighted with something significant. "I've been avoiding this. Avoiding you. Because I didn't know how to face it." He paused for a moment, his voice faltering as he seemed to wrestle with the truth inside him. "But I can't keep pretending, Micah. I can't keep pretending that what happened between us didn't mean something to me." My breath caught in my throat as the words settled into my mind. I had always feared this moment, the moment where we would have to confront what we had done, where the connection between us would be given a name, a meaning. But hearing him say it, hearing the weight of his confession, was more than I had ever expected. "I've spent so much of my life trying to be what others expected me to be," Elijah continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've tried to live up to this image of the perfect pastor, the man who can guide others without faltering. But that's not who I am, not really." The honesty in his voice was both a relief and a shock. I had never seen Elijah like this, vulnerable, open. The man I had known, the one who carried the weight of his role with such calm authority, was now standing before me, shedding all the layers he had carefully crafted. "I don't know how to make sense of what happened between us," he confessed, his eyes searching mine. "But I do know this. I care about you, Micah, more than I've ever cared about anyone, and I'm scared. Scared of what that means, scared of what it could mean for both of us. But I can't pretend it's not there. The way I feel about you, it's real." His words hit me like a wave, crashing over me with an intensity I wasn't prepared for. I had always kept my emotions locked away, buried beneath layers of doubt and fear. I had told myself that it was easier to ignore the parts of me that didn't fit into the box I was supposed to live in. But in that moment, I felt something break open inside me, a crack in the armor I had built to protect myself from the truth. I didn't know how to respond. I was overwhelmed, conflicted. I had felt this connection too, this pull toward him that was impossible to ignore. But what did it mean? How could I reconcile what we had shared with everything I had been taught, everything I had believed about myself? Elijah saw the confusion in my eyes, and for a moment, he seemed to hesitate, as if he feared he had said too much. "I don't expect you to have all the answers," he said softly. "I don't even expect you to feel the same way I do. But I needed to tell you the truth. I couldn't keep hiding from it, from you." The weight of his confession settled around us, thick and heavy. There was a silence that followed, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It wasn't the same silence that had haunted us before. This silence felt like a space where we could finally be honest, where the truth could breathe. In that moment, I realized something. It wasn't just about the kiss. It wasn't just about the connection between us. It was about being seen for who we truly were, without judgment, without fear. Elijah's revelation wasn't just about his feelings for me. It was about him coming to terms with his own truth, his own identity, and sharing that with me. I wanted to speak, to tell him how I felt, but the words were stuck. I was scared. Scared of the consequences. Scared of what would happen if I let myself feel everything I was starting to feel for him. But I knew deep down that I couldn't keep denying it. I couldn't keep hiding from the truth that was sitting right in front of me. "Elijah," I finally said, my voice shaky but resolute. "I don't know what this means. I don't know where it goes from here, but I can't deny that I feel something too. Something real." The relief that washed over his face was palpable, and for the first time, I saw him truly at peace with himself. In that moment, I understood that this wasn't just about us. It was about us both finding the courage to be who we really were, to stop hiding in the shadows. As we stood there, in the quiet space between us, I realized that this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of something new, something raw and real, something worth fighting for. And though the road ahead would be uncertain, one thing was clear: we weren't alone anymore. Sometimes we spend so much of our lives running from the truth, whether it's the truth about who we are or the truth about what we feel. It's easier to pretend, easier to hide behind the walls we've built, to keep ourselves safe from the fear of rejection or judgment. But there comes a time, a moment, when those walls start to crack. And suddenly, everything we've been running from is right there in front of us, impossible to ignore. That's where I found myself, standing in the quiet aftermath of everything I had been trying to hide. The truth was no longer a distant thought, it was real. It was here. And I couldn't run from it anymore. What Elijah and I shared wasn't just a kiss. It wasn't just a moment of passion or a fleeting connection. It was the beginning of something far more powerful, far more meaningful. It was the beginning of embracing everything we had been hiding, everything we had been too afraid to say out loud. And for the first time, I felt like I wasn't alone in that fear. We were in this together. After that night, everything changed. The uncertainty that had once haunted me began to fade. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, doubts, and questions to answer. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid to face them. Because I wasn't facing them alone. Elijah wasn't just a pastor. He wasn't just a man who had come into my life to offer guidance. He was someone who had looked beyond the surface, beyond the roles we were supposed to play, and saw me, the real me. And that was something I had never truly allowed myself to see until then. I had spent so much of my life pretending to be someone I wasn't, playing the part that others expected of me. But in Elijah's eyes, I saw something different, a place where I could be free to be myself, where I didn't have to hide. For the first time in my life, I felt like I didn't need to be ashamed of who I was. But the beauty of that moment wasn't just in the freedom it brought. It was in the connection we built, slowly, carefully, and with intention. We didn't rush into anything. We didn't force it. We allowed ourselves the time and space to explore this new chapter without fear of what others would say, without worrying about the judgment that had held us back for so long. We embraced what was real, what was raw, and what was true between us. I had always been afraid of the unknown, afraid of what it would mean to be open, to be vulnerable. But with Elijah, I learned that vulnerability wasn't weakness, it was strength. The strength to stand in the face of everything we had been told was wrong and say, "This is who I am." And for once, I didn't feel the need to apologize for it. As we moved forward, I realized that love, connection, and truth are not defined by the boxes society tries to put us in. They don't belong to any one person, group, or expectation. They are universal, and they belong to those brave enough to embrace them. It wasn't easy. There were still moments of doubt, moments where the weight of what we were doing pressed down on us. But with each passing day, I felt the connection between us grow stronger, more grounded in something real. Something we had both longed for, but had been too afraid to admit. And so, we moved forward, together, taking each step slowly but surely as we embraced what was unfolding between us. There was no more pretending, no more hiding. We were allowing ourselves to be seen for who we really were. The world wasn't always going to understand. It wasn't going to be easy. But I knew with everything in me that this was the life I was meant to live. This was the love I was meant to experience. The freedom to be true to myself and to embrace love without fear. So, if you're listening right now and you've ever felt trapped by expectations or by fear, let this story be a reminder that it's never too late to embrace who you are. It's never too late to find that person who sees you for who you truly are and loves you for it. And if this story resonated with you, if it made you feel something, if it gave you hope, then I invite you to take that step for yourself. Embrace the connection, embrace the truth, and embrace the love that is waiting for you. You are not alone. If you're ready to step into your truth and leave the fear behind, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and share this message with someone who needs to hear it. Because the world needs more love, more honesty, and more people willing to be true to themselves. Thank you for being here. And remember, you are worthy of love, exactly as you are.